On the trail of Myatt and Drewe. Chapter 1. The Portrait of a Forger. The afternoon light slanted through the window of John Myatt's cramped studio, casting long shadows over his canvas. The brush in his hand glided effortlessly across the rough surface, each stroke deliberate, each color painstakingly chosen. This was a copy, a mimicry, a near-perfect rendition of a Giacometti, and yet it bore no signature. It could not, for all its technical precision, for all the knowledge that Myatt had poured into it. The painting before him was a fraud. This narrative is sponsored by Polly Speaks For You. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been passionate about empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You isn't just a tool. It's a bridge for people to communicate and interact with the world in a meaningful way. By blending historical storytelling with cutting-edge tech, the creator showcases how powerful a voice can be, whether telling your own story or preserving history. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button and help this channel grow. Now back to the story. The room smelled of turpentine and linseed oil, familiar scents that had been the backdrop to his life for as long as he could remember. There was something almost meditative in the act of creation, even when the creation itself was a lie. For the thousandth time, Myatt's mind drifted back to how it had all begun, to that first desperate decision that had changed the course of his life. It had been years since he'd sold an original work, and after his marriage crumbled, leaving him with 2 young children and a stack of bills, painting had become less a passion and more a necessity. But his landscapes, his portraits, they fetched too little. The art world, so lofty, so unattainable, had shunned him. The real money, he quickly learned, lay not in the creation of art, but in its deception. And then, like a devil whispering at his shoulder, John Drewe had walked into his life. Drewe had been everything Myatt was not: charming, confident, a man who could sell anything to anyone. His ideas were big, bold, and dangerous, but at the time, they had seemed like salvation. He offered Myatt a way out, a way to turn his considerable talents into wealth. Not through his own art, but by painting as others had painted. "You're wasted here," Drewe had said, standing in the doorway of Myatt's studio, surveying the uninspired portraits of suburban families. "Your talent deserves more." Myatt had been reluctant at first. Forging the work of others was a line he never thought he'd cross, but Drewe was persuasive. He talked of the art world as a place full of pretension, a game played by the wealthy to inflate their own egos. They didn't care about the work itself, only the name attached to it. So, why not give them what they wanted? "You could be anyone," Drewe had whispered, leaning in close. "You could be Giacometti, Matisse, or Chagall. You could be remembered forever through your imitations." The promise of money and recognition, even if it was stolen, was too tempting. And so Myatt had agreed. The 2 men struck a deal, and thus began one of the most audacious art frauds in modern history. Chapter 2. The Perfect Conspiracy. Drewe was a man of contradictions. He dressed in tweed and spoke like an academic, with the confident air of a professor, yet his true skill lay in deception. He had no formal background in art, no grand education to back up his claims, but that didn't matter. He was a master of appearances, and appearances were all that mattered in the world he navigated. His method was genius in its simplicity. Myatt would paint the forgeries, remarkably accurate reproductions of some of the 20th century's greatest masters. Then Drewe would handle the rest, weaving a web of lies so intricate, so convincing, that even the most seasoned collectors and curators were fooled. It wasn't just the paintings that Drewe sold, it was the provenance. That was his true talent, creating a believable history for each piece. He had contacts in galleries, museums, and archives. He knew how to infiltrate those hallowed institutions and plant the seeds of his deception. He didn't just fake the art, he faked the records. He made it appear as though these newly forged paintings had been part of the art world's history for decades. The first forgery, a Jean Dubuffet, was sold through a small auction house, one with loose standards for verifying provenance. Drewe had inserted fake documents into the archives of the Tate, making it seem as though the painting had been in private collections for years before being quietly sold. The sale was a success. The Dubuffet fetched over £25,000, far more than Myatt had ever dreamed of earning. And that was just the beginning. They moved on to bigger names: Ben Nicholson, Marc Chagall, Matisse, and bigger profits. With each forgery, their confidence grew. Drewe's network expanded, and Myatt's skill improved with every brushstroke. But as the stakes got higher, so did the risks. Myatt was beginning to feel uneasy. The more successful they became, the more Drewe pushed him. There was a recklessness to Drewe that Myatt couldn't shake. He talked about expanding their operation, selling to major galleries, taking on even more audacious targets. But Myatt had learned enough about the art world to know that their luck wouldn't hold forever. Chapter 3: Detective Kate Russell. Detective Kate Russell had been with the Metropolitan Police's Art and Antiques Unit for over a decade, and she'd seen her fair share of con artists and forgers. But there was something about the case that landed on her desk one rainy afternoon in November that felt different. It started with a tip: a gallery assistant who had noticed something off about a painting in their collection, a Giacometti that didn't quite seem right. Russell was a sharp investigator, known for her meticulous attention to detail. As she stood before the painting in the gallery, her eyes narrowed. It was a beautiful piece, there was no doubt about that. But there was something about it, the brush strokes, the texture of the paint, that nagged at her. It was too clean, too precise. Giacometti's work had a rawness to it, an almost frantic energy. This painting, while technically perfect, lacked that spark of authenticity. She ran her fingers lightly over the canvas, stopping when she reached the corner where the artist's signature should be. It was there, clear as day, but something about it felt off. Russell knew the techniques forgers used to create convincing fakes, but the art world was a maze of deception. Provenance was everything, and this painting had it, at least on paper. The gallery's records showed the piece had been in private hands for decades before being donated. But as Russell began digging deeper, she found inconsistencies. A name that didn't check out here, a date that didn't match there. It was as though someone had carefully constructed a backstory for the painting, and Russell's gut told her that whoever had done it was far too skilled for this to be an isolated incident. Days turned into weeks as Russell followed the trail. What began as a single questionable painting soon snowballed into a series of discoveries that shook the very foundations of the art world. Each forgery was linked to one name: John Drewe. The deeper Russell went, the more she uncovered. Drewe's forgery empire stretched back years, encompassing dozens of works and millions of pounds in fraudulent sales. But it wasn't just Drewe's manipulation of the art market that fascinated her. It was the painter behind the forgeries. John Myatt. He wasn't just a forger. He was an artist in his own right, someone with immense talent who had chosen, for reasons she couldn't yet understand, to use that talent for deception. Chapter 4: Cracks in the Canvas. Myatt could feel the world closing in on him. The euphoria of their early success had long faded, replaced by a growing sense of dread. He was painting more and more, trying to keep up with Drewe's demands. But the thrill of the con, the rush of fooling the experts, had turned into a slow-burning fear that gnawed at him in the quiet moments. He could hear Drewe's voice in his head, whispering that they were untouchable. But Myatt knew better. They had pushed too far, too fast, and he had begun to see the cracks in Drewe's armor. Drewe was growing careless, arrogant, and Myatt knew that arrogance would be their undoing. The final straw came when Drewe proposed selling a Chagall to a major auction house, one with a reputation for rigorous authentication processes. Myatt had balked. It was too risky, too high profile. But Drewe, always the charmer, had brushed aside his concerns. "They'll never know," he'd said with a grin. "You're the best, John. No one can tell the difference." But Myatt knew they would. He could feel it in his bones. And so, one cold winter evening, as Drewe was away on one of his many trips, Myatt made a decision. He would stop. He would walk away from it all, from Drewe, from the lies, from the forgeries that had consumed his life. But by then it was too late. Chapter 5: The Fall. Detective Russell's case against Drewe and Myatt had grown stronger by the day. She had gathered enough evidence to arrest both men, and as she stood outside Myatt's modest home in the countryside, she felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Myatt answered the door, his face pale and drawn, as though he had been waiting for this moment. He didn't resist as Russell explained the charges. He didn't protest or try to run. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. As they led him away, Myatt cast one last glance at the studio that had been his sanctuary and his prison. The walls were lined with the forgeries he had created, each one a testament to his skill and his downfall. Drewe, ever the showman, had tried to fight his arrest. He blustered and raged, claiming innocence, insisting that he was being framed. But in the end, his web of lies had unraveled, and he too was taken into custody. Epilogue: a brush with redemption. John Myatt would eventually serve time for his crimes, but his story didn't end there. After his release, he made the decision to leave the world of forgeries behind and turn his talents to something more honest. He began painting again, this time under his own name, creating works that were sold not for their deception, but for their beauty. Indeed, John Myatt's redemption story took an extraordinary turn after his release from prison. Following his foray into painting original works in the style of masters, he gained significant media attention. His unique journey from criminal forger to celebrated artist captured the public's imagination, and it wasn't long before the media took notice. Myatt went on to host the BBC television series The Forger's Masterclass, where his expertise in art forgeries was put to good use. In this series, Myatt shared his deep knowledge of artistic techniques and demonstrated how to replicate the styles of famous painters, such as Monet, Van Gogh, and Picasso. His talent and insights became a valuable resource for viewers, showcasing his skill in an open and honest way. This turn of events marked a profound transformation for Myatt. The man who had once deceived the art world with his forgeries was now teaching others how to create works in the style of the great masters. He provided an unprecedented look into the techniques he had once used to fool even the most seasoned experts, turning his past mistakes into a tool for education and inspiration. In hosting the Forger's Masterclass, Myatt not only redeemed himself in the eyes of the public, but also carved out a new, legitimate place for himself in the art world. His post-crime career became a story of how talent, when redirected into honest pursuits, could lead to both personal and professional redemption. Through his involvement in television, Myatt's story came full circle. No longer hiding behind his skills in the shadows, he proudly stood in the spotlight, using his expertise to educate and entertain. In doing so, he reclaimed his place in the art world, not as a forger, but as an artist in his own right. As for Drewe, his fate was less kind. His charm and wit had failed him in the end, and he spent the rest of his life trying to reclaim the respect he had so carelessly thrown away. The art world had moved on, as it always did, but the story of John Myatt and John Drewe remained, a cautionary tale of talent, temptation, and the high price of deception. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software, visit www.polispeaksforyou.co.za and support this meaningful dyslexic initiative. Thank you for watching.